It's a bit hot, eh? It's going to be hotter when the discussion starts. So, so, so be braced for it. Um, we want to begin the program, and I hope you are in the right session. We are discussing digital roadmaps. So I just want to make sure that everybody here is that is the session that they have come with, because apparently there are many other sessions that are going on. So I want to give this to the moderator to start it off. But this is going to be an interactive session like all the others that we have had. So please, I wonder whether, because of all the noise, if could you move to these seats just here? Yeah, because there's a bit of noise. We want also to limit the noise. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. This is a very good, I once was a teacher, so this is a very good class. When you tell them to move, they actually move. I am telling you. But I'm not going to choose on you to speak, so don't be afraid. Because usually when you're told to sit in front, the fear is that you're going to be chosen to speak. I'm not going to choose you to speak. We only have these 3 speakers who are going to tell us, the experience on a roadmap to, the digital agriculture policy. So, welcome.
Thank you very much. And thank you all for being here and for moving up. I look forward to that engagement in the Q&A section as well. So, by way of introduction, I'm Sonia Hu, Managing Director and Partner with Boston Consulting Group, and I've had the privilege of working with these gentlemen and others in the digital agriculture system space. So, first of all, I'll start by introducing our panel members here. So we have Stuart Collis, Senior Program Officer for Digital Agriculture, Digital Farmer Services from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Parmesh Shah, Global Lead for Digital Agriculture from the World Bank Group. And Ben Adam, the Advisor for Agriculture and Fisheries Trade Policy from the Commonwealth Secretariat. So thank you all for being here. I'll just do a very quick context setting here. As we all know, digital agriculture has tremendous potential to unlock productivity and market connections for small-scale producers and to support better, more impactful decision-making and policy-making for policymakers and funders. Over the last few years, and even this week at HRF, we've seen many innovations in the digital agriculture ag tech space, ranging from soil data and data systems to chatbots that can deliver tailored advisory or other precision agriculture practices. At the same time, though, we've seen many challenges across the sector from companies, from governments, from development partners, in actually scaling those solutions and getting users to adopt those solutions at scale. And so today, what we really want to talk about is, what are some of those challenges that we see and how can we bring a systems approach to tackling that at the national level. In addition to that, last year in Ethiopia, the ATA, or now ATI, led the development of a digital agriculture extension and advisory services roadmap, which was really intended to help bring together stakeholders and set a direction, a vision, and ambition, and set of actions around advancing digital extension and advisory specifically. So talk a little bit about that as well. So with that, I want to direct our first question here to Stuart. Can you share a little bit about how the foundation has thought about digital agriculture systems, and also a little bit about the work in Ethiopia, the process, and some of the learnings from that?
Can you guys hear me? Okay, great. Yeah, thanks, Sonia. And maybe I could sort of step back a little bit, I mean, at the foundation, we've been investing in all sorts of digital solutions for some time, from soil maps to, advisory services, and been doing that for many years. And, like others, we've seen a lot of excitement around digital. Everybody talks about the potential of digital. Yet, when we look at some of the data, we've not seen complete adoption, let's say, of those digital services. And I'm talking about advisory services, financial services, insurance products, market access tools. It was a report that Ben Dom actually led from the CTA on digitalization of African agriculture, where it showed that, of all of the farmers across sub-Saharan Africa, a small percentage, less than 10%, were actively registered on those platforms and even less actively using them. So clearly there's some barriers to adoption. There's some challenges with scale. You can look at some of the digital solutions out there across sub-Saharan Africa, and just a handful have reached over 1 million farmers, when we've got to reach, obviously, multi-millions of farmers with these services. So that's when we decided to take a step back and sort of look at these national agriculture systems. So take a more systemic approach, try to identify what are the catalytic precursors to scale. So how do we ensure that we're building towards a complete digital system at the national level? And it varies from country to country as to what the digital maturity of different countries are. And we sort of broke it down into, I guess, 3 main layers. One is the enabling environment. So what is the sort of digital infrastructure? What's the hosting environment look like? What are the data policies that exist at a national level? The second layer is around data, content, and agricultural technology companies that are providing services. Are there soil maps? Are there weather and climate services? Are there advisory information? Do you have an enabling environment for those ag tech companies to thrive and scale? And then finally, at the farmer-facing level, do you have human-centered design? Are you accounting for gender, biases and norms to make sure that those farmers have equal access to these tools? And so this approach seemed to work. We started looking at precursors to all of those things. We looked at Ethiopia as a place where we could really go deep on this and work with the Agricultural Transformation Institute, with our partners at BCG, to really convene with the community in Ethiopia. What was really important about this project was that it was led by the Agricultural Transformation Institute. I think that's a really important component, that anything like this has to be driven by country priorities. It's not sort of donors coming in and saying what we think is the right investments. It should be the country telling us what they think the right investments are. So what we developed was a roadmap going out 8 years, and identified about 30 opportunities, about $53 million in potential investments. Examples are things, farmer registries, just knowing where farmers are, where their plot is, what they're growing. That was fundamental information we often don't have. Another area was around an innovation pipeline. So, let's not reinvent the wheel. Let's bring ag tech companies into the country. Let's evaluate them, measure how well they're performing, give them a chance to show what they can do in the Ethiopian landscape, but also nurture local companies. And so, out of this roadmap have come some really great investment opportunities and investment packages that multiple donors are going to be required to fund. And I think that's another important takeaway, is it really needs to be a coordinated approach. We need to engage with other donors early. And you can think of these things as being a combination of private sector solutions supported by digital public infrastructure that really often isn't there today. So that's the work we've done in Ethiopia, and then partnering with Pamesh and the team at World Bank, we'll be looking to scale this to other geographies. We're currently working on Nigeria and Odisha, taking a similar approach.
Thank you, Stuart. And with that, segueing into our next question, Ramesh, for you, how did you at the World Bank, and by extension, how could others think about converting these types of roadmaps into actual investments on the ground?
Thank you, Sonia. So I think the way we came into it, when we started working with government of Kenya on 2 investments of 450 million, we found that Kenya's landscape had done M-Pesa in payments. There were a lot of innovators already in Kenya, but we were not incorporating, or the government was not incorporating them into service delivery. So and also the data which existed was lying scattered and not integrated with each other. The data was not talking to each other. So we supported development of a big data platform which included farmer registries with million farmers, and an innovation platform which would work in linking the million farmers to 24 innovators who were selected out of a innovation challenge and all that. So from that we realized that if you have investment in a data platform and an innovation ecosystem, you can create impact on scale. And from that, I think clearly when we worked in Ethiopia with Stewart and Gates and BCG, we realized that it's not enough to do one by one. Let us create a 5 to 10 year roadmap on what the investments would look like. Otherwise it's episodical. You go and do the pitching, and then after that you don't get money, and then things happen and they dissipate after that. So basically the solution is more like a platform solution and an ecosystem investments. So at the World Bank, we have taken the Ethiopia roadmap, and in our next project, we have invested now on what came out of the roadmap. We have decided that we will do more roadmaps with countries. There is request from many countries. Even this conference, 4 or 5 countries said that they want to do digital registries. Every minister wants to do a digital registry now. But it's not enough to do digital registry. You have to invest in other forms of data, create a platform, and then you have to have a lot of innovators, both local and African, who should be working with the government on creating innovation platform. So what we feel is that if you are interested in your country on developing a roadmap and working, either you are in the government or you are in the private sector, and if you want to become part of this roadmap development, you please contact us, and we will be ready to work with you on this. Because we feel that Africa, if you really do, in Kenya, we have reached 1 million farmers through this platform already. And 1 million was considered very difficult to reach. And now we have a request from government to reach 4 million. And I think you can do scale, provided you invest in a roadmap, a data platform, and an innovation ecosystem. So these 3 are the ingredients we need to invest in. But the roadmap tells you what to invest in, where to invest in, how to invest in it, what it will cost. So we are committed now to invest. Today we announced a 300 million investment in Tanzania, Farming System Resilience Program. It has 20 million on data and innovation within that 300 million. So we will now work with government of Tanzania and a lot of other stakeholders who are here to develop a roadmap and then invest. So I'll stop there, and please ask any question, because it's very difficult to explain in a short period. Thank you.
Thank you, Parmesh. And I heard there an open invitation to engage for sure. And I think also underscored the importance of having both companies on the ground involved in the roadmap development to understand what are the real barriers and challenges to scaling, as well as funders involved to shape that agenda so that you actually can go from the planning into the specific investments. Ben, next question over to you. So we've heard talk of precursors and enablers, registries, farmer profiles, and so on. Could you talk a little bit about, how you think about digital public infrastructure as it relates to agriculture?
Thank you. Thank you. So, building on what Stewart and Parmesh have said, you will notice that the roadmap is like a policy, a strategy, a plan for a country, right? To guide you, the implementers, basically, the private sector, NGOs, the farmer cooperatives, on what to do, how to do it, what is protecting you, what direction you should go, that kind of thing. That's the roadmap. And Stewart mentioned data as one of the components, and Parmesh also emphasized that. So a DPI is, I will not attempt to define or explain what is it. It's a digital public infrastructure. And people have all kinds of models and approaches to DPI. Examples, as you may know, in India especially, with the the national ID system, they refer to that as, a DPI, digital public infrastructure for national identity. There's another one called UPI. So that is for financial payment services, a unified payment interface that supports financial service sector providers to be able to share data and transaction. For the agricultural sector, the way we are, conceptualizing it is that it should be to support data, one of the components that we have talked about within the roadmap or within the strategy. So that infrastructure should support data in the country. Okay, so it's a national approach to digital agriculture. So the Commonwealth, we deal with member states like the UN bodies. So we work with our member states. So we are taking the same angle. How do we support our member states to take a national approach to that data, the data component, through a public infrastructure, through a digital public infrastructure? It's a complex thing. It's a complex, design and process. But basically what we are saying is, take it as any infrastructure, okay? Everybody says data is the new oil or the new gold. If you have oil in your country, you're not just going to allow people to come and mine it. You have regulations. Companies will get permits to be able to mine it. Why is it that our data is not, managed in that process? So our model of digital public infrastructure should take into consideration regulations and policies clearly in the country concerning farmers' data or whatever agricultural data, how to access it, how to protect it, how to share it, all kinds of things. And then the technology comes in to support the data sharing, but not bilateral data sharing, but taking a national approach to create that infrastructure that stakeholders in the country can open their data systems with support of the regulations, incentives, and others to share part of your data, not your whole business data, but part of your data with that infrastructure to reduce duplication, so that, the data that you have, somebody else will not go and pay and the farmer to collect that same data. Because you have it already, why should you go? If it's available in that national infrastructure, why not subscribe to that and use it? So the technology has to do that. And we also talk about, if you build that infrastructure, DPI, who should be the regulator? Who should manage it? We think that government should drive the process, but they should not, be the custodian. There should be an independent entity, a neutral entity that is trusted by all partners to, use the policies and the technology to manage their data. Just as financial trustees, you put your money to them and they, add value to it, get interest back to you, something like that. And then the final component of that infrastructure is who pays for it? How do you finance it and how do you sustain it? So there should be all kinds of business model around that infrastructure. Part of it should be open, but we think part of it should be monetized. And as we go to the countries, we leave it to the stakeholders to think, discuss, and design it by themselves, together with those, who have the money to support the financing, to work with them to develop this infrastructure. So that's the difference between the DPI and the roadmap. So the DPI is part of the roadmap, the national plan, national strategy. That's the way we look at it.
Thank you so much, Ben. So I would now at this point like to open it up to our amazing audience, and I already see hands going up. I think, gentlemen.
Yeah, thanks a lot, everyone. My name is Dio. I'm with Heifer International. So it's a great conversation, and I'm happy to be here. Thanks, Nixon, for bringing me here. Because my role at Heifer is essentially how we leverage technological innovation, integrate it to support smallholder farmers across Africa, right? So I find quite a number of items you've discussed today quite interesting. Okay, the roadmap, the infrastructure as well. I'll remember the third one as I speak. Okay, so the first one on infrastructure. Now, digital technology is nothing without data, right? And you can't fetch data if you don't have infrastructure. Infrastructure, in my sense, might be a bit different from what you're saying. I think your infrastructure has to do with how you're aggregating data, mining data, for the public good and so on. But I'm looking at infrastructure from the lens of farmers who lack internet, who lack mobile telephony services, and all of that. So, that is a constraint because without infrastructure, you can't have data, you can't digitalize at the last mile, okay? So what's the response to that? That's one. That type of infrastructure, that's one. Now, secondly, on the roadmap, it sparks my curiosity, okay? Because trying to leverage innovation across our value chains, there have been quite a number of use cases, okay? Access to finance, access to insurance, storage, and so many, access to market and everything, right? Now, how essentially do you develop a roadmap when you have so many multi-dimensional use cases? How do you prioritize? How does that work? And is it a unique template as you move from geography to geography? Pretty much how all of that plays out together is what I'd like to know more about. Thank you.
Thank you. Stuart, do you?
The connectivity one. I'll take the roadmap. So in terms of connectivity, if you look at the World Bank, we have envisaged 10 billion investment in connectivity, especially the rural part, which is generally underserviced through technology. So I think in 10 years' time, we would have reached 85% of the unserviced areas through the investments we are going to make with other partners, both the private sector, but also the fundamental investments which are required, regulations which allow new people to come in. The number of licenses given for rural connectivity has expanded by 3 times in Africa. You can see even Ethiopia has given a license to Vodafone to come and do things. So there were dominant monopolies for a long time in Africa. So now I think it's going a little bit higher. So the connectivity part, I think, will take about 5 to 10 years, and I think that will become a level playing field as we go forward. So I'm just telling from our perspective the way we envisage this as a kind of a funding agency for digital connectivity. So I will talk about other issues, let others talk about other issues. Although I have ideas on others also, but why don't you take?
No, just to add to what Kwame said. So if you listen to the components mentioned by Stuart, one of them is the enabling environment for digital agriculture. So that is part of it. Countries need to create that enabling environment with those kind of infrastructure, the cell towers, the connectivities, the devices and all those things. And it's taking time, right? It's taking time. So I think it's both public-private partnership issue. You don't expect the private sector to come and just build those infrastructure. The government also has to come in and bring some. So for us, the framework that we are using, the enabling environment includes some of those. And it's not just those digital infrastructure. You can also have the connectivity in the village. Without road, you can't deliver the goods, right? So all the infrastructure need to come together, need to work together. That's why we refer to it as the enabling environment to support the digital agriculture. Yeah.
Great. And to answer your other question on the roadmap prioritization, I think that's a really good question. Everybody wants to do everything at once. And so part of the process of developing a roadmap is to prioritize. And that's why it needs to be country-owned. You have to have an institution within the country that owns the roadmap and is making those decisions about what value chains, what solutions to prioritize. And that could be based on national policy. It could be on, food security or import substitution or particular value chains. But you can't do everything at once, and so prioritizing is super important for showing success and how this can work. Now, over time, one of the ideas is you're not just solving that one first solution. You're building a framework that allows you to continually develop new use cases over time. So, for example, in Ethiopia, at the top layer on the innovation side, we're working on an innovation pipeline, and that sort of builds the capacity within ATI to run challenges. Let's say they want to prioritize insurance. So bring in 5 ag-tech insurance companies, give them access to development agents and to the ACCs, let them test their product, see how it performs, build those relationships with them, maybe select some of those winners or the ones that perform best, and then you move on to the next use case. So I think that's sort of what we're thinking about. But at the DPI level, some of the things Ben's talking about, those underpinning DPIs should support all use cases. Ultimately, that's the sort of part of the definition of a DPI.
So in terms of Hyper, what you said, the good thing is that you are working with the same innovation partners we are working with. Whether it is Hello Tractor, whether it is DigiCow or Kusa, they're all working with them. So I think the good thing would be that in a roadmap which we are going to do in Kenya, you come as a strategic partner and help us define what the roadmap looks like, so that we have these innovations scale up by at least 5 to 6 times in a short period of time. So that would be the challenge now. So one side you are looking at whether the country wants to export a crop, you come from the value chain side. Second, you come from the food security side. Third, you come from the innovators who are already there. Because you can't create innovation out of nothing. Yeah, so you have to work with the existing innovators and scale up. So I find that in Kenya, on an average, we have at least 75 innovations which can go to scale, and if they become part of roadmap, we will find a way that they will be able to scale up fast.
Ramesh. All right, thank you. Question?
Oh, I think that was someone before me.
Okay.
Was there somebody before me?
Yes, why don't we go?
Fine.
Thank you. And we'll come to you guys.
Hi, I'm Mark Blackett from the EMEA network. We know each other a little bit. It's great to hear 75 innovations that can go to scale if the infrastructure is there. Maybe that's related to farmers, but what we're interested in is also looking at ag tech that relates to enterprises. And we did a study with Calro, with Agribora, and to be honest, there's a lot of confusion there about what is a good technology for different stages of evolution of an enterprise. So I just encourage, when you're looking at roadmaps, when you're taking this work forward, that you don't just look at farmer-facing tech, look at the enterprise-facing tech, and that's something that we could definitely work with you on. Yeah.
That in Kenya, the new value chain project is going to work with 700 SMEs and 130 farmer organizations. And we are working on a digital platform for SMEs and all along with it. We'll come to you. Because the roadmap in Kenya is not going to be the same as Ethiopia. Kenya is a much more advanced system in terms of the agtech industry. And you also have a lot of good ideas there. So I think we should build a vertical within the next roadmap in the issues you are talking about. I completely agree with you that this can't be a uniform thing that we work only with farmers. I think we have to work with other value chain actors and see how it can add value to that. And there are a lot of people who are telling us, why didn't you work with us and all in this aspect. So we need a similar model with SMEs also in the same way. Listen. Thank you. Thank you for the point.
Thank you.
Thanks. A question to all 3 panelists. Sometimes when we talk about infrastructure, including digital, it's very focused on the physical servers in the room that people can see. With the growth of cloud providers, particularly at national levels across Africa, have you helped trigger that change management conversation around looking at investments not only in physical infrastructure, but cloud-based as well? I'm curious in particular because when you're looking at low and difficult resource environments, making the argument for resource efficiency is critical, and I think cloud is a part of that. I'm curious to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, so I want to clarify, so your question is around cloud services.
Infrastructure, how cloud fits as part of digital public infrastructure in overall national strategies.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's certainly, I'm not saying this is easy to solve for when you don't have cloud providers and hosting environments. I mean, and it's actually going to get more difficult as we look at AI models that not only require storage, but compute, massive compute as well. I mean, right now, to be honest, a lot of those AI models, the generative AI models, are simply out of reach of most organizations around the world, not just governments in sub-Saharan Africa. I don't know the latest sort of situation with services like AWS. There's a cloud hosting environment in South Africa, but most countries don't have that. The best examples we have of really good DPI are from India, where they obviously have a lot of in-country cloud hosting options. A lot of the states have their own hosting services. But, I mean, in countries like Ethiopia, governments are starting to invest in their own data hosting environments. Now, they might be more expensive than, say, the cloud providers can provide. And I think probably it's going to be a hybrid approach, especially as you see data policies emerge, as we saw in India. There's some data that they're okay with you hosting externally to the country. That could be hosted on any cloud provider and lowering the cost. And there's some data that they may require it needs to be hosted within the country. So I think it's going to depend on the country and the country policies around that. But definitely an area that we need a lot more investment in cloud services and data hosting cloud platforms.
So 30% of our programs in the World Bank have moved to the cloud computing environment. The governments are now keen to move because they're very costly to maintain servers and they want to move to that. So I think clearly this has become an appraisal area when we finance projects. We look at infrastructure and we look at cloud solutions there. The second area where we are working on, we are now producing a global report on 5G in agriculture and food. And because 5G will have to come if we really want to do the advanced data analytics and other kinds of things, and that's related with the cloud computing. And I think you should get in touch with Kunal, who is the CEO of Cropin. And they have done a lot of work on cloud architecture. So all the countries they're saying whatever data we have in the cloud will be available to you from day one. And that allows you not to sort of invest from scratch. And you can do that. So there are deep tech companies which will work on this. And maybe they will have developed it somewhere and they will offer it at a much cheaper rate to a new company. So there is many models which will come in this case. But cloud computing is definitely the way we want to go in the next 3 to 5 years to make a more universal service obligation. So if this doesn't become universal service obligation, there will be digital divide, another kind, which will start permeating. Thank you.
Yeah, not just to. I want to ask question instead of respond. Because yesterday we were talking myself and
before you respond, before you answer a question, can I ask one?
No, hold on. No. It's the same thing. So after this, I'll give it to you. Yeah. No, it's about the cloud computing. So yesterday we were talking about it, and he gave an example. For example, that Ethiopia, not very willing to go out. They want to host the data. So my question is, what is the concern? Why is it that countries should be concerned with their data being hosted outside their country? That's my question.
Nixon, you have to let him come. You want to have a follow-up?
You want to answer?
Let others go. No, I think gentlemen. Nixon, you can't monopolize.
No, I wanted to ask a question too.
Maybe I can just answer your question, Ben, to start with. It's a lot of people see it as, and to be honest, actually, the really interesting thing about Ethiopia was when we really looked at it. There's a perception that there's a data policy in Ethiopia that you can't host data outside the country, right? Everybody who's worked there has heard that. There actually is no national law that says that. It's a perception. And so I think it's digging into the details, understanding exactly what exists today in terms of data policies and regulation. Now, India has made progress in developing out those regulations, and they have a varied system that, some data is fine to host outside the country, some data that, for national security reasons, they feel it needs to be hosted, personal data, and it's got to have security around it and all of that. So I think it is going to be a hybrid approach over time that most countries would take.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, so my name is Mandla Nkomo. I'm with the CGIAR Excellence in Agronomy Initiative, and we're doing a lot of this work around, building the solutions on top of these data stacks. But I do have two questions around the whole roadmap idea and some of the key enablers. The first one really relates to the DPI concept, right? First of all, how do we deal with the skills challenge for managing a sophisticated set of data that cuts across a number of sectors, whether it's agricultural or socioeconomic? Because I'm sure you'll agree with me, Pamesh, that in your pilot in Kenya, a lot of your investment was about warm bodies who knew how to build that big data platform. How do we advance in building the skill sets across countries to manage the data sets? And then my second question is around the innovation layer. For a lot of the companies that need to build solutions on top of the data, like my colleague said, they're often startups. And there's probably not a lot of fit-for-purpose funding or incentives that would allow them to really build innovative solutions. What can we do, to ensure that that innovation layer just goes wild? I think you shared, Pamesh, the South Korea example. When you look at it, you can see it's buzzing. There's 101 different solutions on top of the data. How do we incentivize that in Africa? And what kind of collaborations do you see that we could do to really make that move? Skills on the one side for DPI, but also incentives for the development of the solutions. Thank you.
Sure. I can say something about the skills, but I'll leave it for all of you to contribute. Again, if you look at the roadmap, that is one of the enabling environments. The technology you need to. So capacity building, literacy, they are all enabling environment. From my experience working in African countries, yeah, but you can prove me wrong. I don't think we lack the skills. I think there are a lot of young guys, educated, IT experts. It's all about, getting them, capturing them, and putting them together to work. In the private sector, yes, but you need them, right? The government need them. So I don't think we need to look outside the continent. So the Commonwealth, what we are doing, we're going down to organize national dialogues, and that's the purpose, because we want to discover some of those skills. We don't want to take, things from UK, Australia, big Commonwealth countries to Uganda. We believe they have the skills. They need, capacity building, guidance, direction, as we think through to be able to do it. So, yeah, I think that is the way. I think, but you can contribute, and
So just to add to that, what we are doing in every program now is that the capacity and institutional arrangement and incentives are being part of the investment. So you have a chief digital officer, chief data officer, a set of digital interns, digital consultants there. But I think we have to go beyond that. Today we discussed with Agro possibility of launching a leadership development and capacity initiative in Africa, where we are talking about 100 data scientists in Africa who are African. And they are able to then work with each of the programs, because where are you going to get people to work with these governments? You have to get the pool developed there. And then we also need to go to the mainstream universities and offer data courses, and also we are looking at going to Strathmore and others and offer specific courses on data. So I think we have to go upstream and solve that problem of skill by doing that. If you go to the government and then do adult learning, it doesn't work. Our experience is there, people who have crossed 35 are very difficult to train, including me, for that matter. So I think we have to come out with this next generation of people who will then be part of these ministries And the culture of Ministry of Agriculture will be that they will be housed by young people working on this. So I think that's something we have to work on. And the innovation part which you were saying, I think you are completely right about that. We need to develop, we are thinking now of launching a data analytics lab kind of a model in Africa, wherein a lot of people will be available for short periods to work with innovators, SMEs, AgTechs and all, because you can't afford them full time. You have to develop a model where people work with these innovators to build the business model until they have reached and included innovation in the business model. So I think the point is very well taken. And I think in Kenya, I think because these people are on one platform, they are learning very rapidly from each other and changing their business model to a different than what they started with. So I feel that there's a network effect, there is a mentoring and coaching one. So we need to be very innovative and nimble in the way we do this in future.
Chime in? Yeah, quickly chime in on both those topics. Maybe just one observation is skills is also a problem in like the US right now with AI. It happens when there's new technologies, there's not many people that really understand the technology. You know, generative AI right now is, you cannot find an AI engineer in the US right now. It's impossible. And so, you know, you sort of have these, you know, waves of new technology, and as, you know, that technology gets more embedded, you know, into our systems, then you start to see, how many courses have you all seen on AI in the last, you know, few months? I mean, they're popping up everywhere. As people get educated about how to use it, how to deploy it, then you start to see more capacity come into the market. On the innovation side, I think one thing to point out is that there is a huge gap between these very early stage grants that are going to startups, you know, 600 across sub-Saharan Africa right now probably, and then when they are investable. And so, you know, one of the things we're doing is we're building a platform called AgBase, and it's to track startups across all low and middle income countries, track data on them, how they're performing, and provision that up to impact investors. We need more impact investors to come into this space, fill that gap between a $500,000 grant and a $10 million, you know, early stage investment.
Thank you so much. So I think we've got a comment in the back and then a question up front.
No, it's just an affirmation. I was sitting very far back, but he started describing me because I used to work in banking as a CIO at Access Bank and then innovation officer for Citi in East Africa. And then I jumped into coffee. So the moment he was mentioning, I was like, you know what? You're literally describing me. And I had to pull a chair because when he mentioned Strathmore, I went to Strathmore University doing BBIT. It's exactly what they were saying before. And we discussed, I'm a grantee also of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
so maybe my question is a very general question. So all these efforts, what are we solving for? That's number one. And number two, even as we build the roadmap, is the demand coming from ourselves or is the demand coming from government? So those two questions are very critical.
And when you say demand coming from ourselves, what do you mean?
The people who are seated here, the organization presented here.
First question. Yeah. I mean, as far as what we're solving for, look, I mean, honestly, when you look at digital is not a solution in and of itself. It actually doesn't do anything. It's an enabler. Right? So I'd much rather talk to an extension agent face to face if I could, but there isn't a one-to-one ratio of extension agents to farmers. So it's really an enabler about how do we scale the services that farmers need, you know, access to inputs, finance, insurance, and advisory. How do we get more localized? How do we adapt to climate change with, you know, higher resolution soil maps and agronomy? So I think, you know, we're solving for some of these big problems. So you got to nail it down at the field level for an individual farmer, but do it in a way that, you know, it's not purely digital. Digital is not the solution. It's really the services they enable. And, you know, also thinking about other types of users beyond farmers, extension agents, you already heard, you know, SMEs, other types of users across this value chain. So I think we're still trying to solve the same problems everybody else is, but, you know, enabling that agricultural transformation process using digital. So,
Just to add that, so I'm an agricultural extension officer. I'm not a tech guy. I spent 4 years in Ghana doing field work after my first degree. So the challenges that these technologies can, the solutions that these technologies can bring to some of those challenges. So in hello? Yeah. 2001, like 2000, 2001, 2, 3, I was working on the field managing data for some private companies, through contract farming. And that was the time I started experiencing data issue, because you need to collect the data and inform the company of the next year's investment. How much, what is the size of the market for the farmers, how much fertilizer they need to acquire, how to prepare for the purchase of the produce at the end of the season, and that based on data. And I struggled. It was 99, 2000, 2001, And those are some of the things that we think some of these, technologies can help address. So those are the problems. So it's not just as Siwa said, it's not just pushing technology, but trying to respond to the demands. And that answers your second question. So the demand from us, from I believe the World Bank too, is that it's from the member states, right? Yeah, from the member states. So we do the thinking, conceptualize, come to them, and then, because sometimes you need to create awareness about some of these issues for the countries. And once they buy into it, then demand is built up for you to, provide the solutions.
I think the investment climate for AgTech is at the initial stages, where FinTech was about 5 to 7 years back. There were a lot of enabling public good investments which were made in infrastructure and all for FinTech. A lot of initial work on payment platforms, all done by public good investment. And then it flipped. An inflection point came and it flipped. So I feel that we are not yet reached that stage. We have to continue to work on the public good investments and also the innovation platforms until we reach a stage where there's a flip. And in Africa, that flip should not come at a late stage, should come at the same time where it comes in other parts of the world. So you have clearly Latin America, India having some kind of a inflection point already arrived. In Africa, our effort is to now bring it times closer. And I also feel that we have to do more work in bringing AgTech and FinTech together. It will happen faster. If we purely focus on AgTech, then it will take a lot of time to happen because agriculture is considered risky. So FinTech and AgTech, if they are combined, and agribusiness, SMEs, we bring all these three agendas together, then we might see a faster, less time taken to reach the inflection.
And maybe just one quick example. In India, they introduced the Aadhaar system, so that ID system, unique ID for everybody in the country, billions of people. They estimate that it would have taken to get 80% financial inclusion in India would have taken decades at the rate that it was happening until they introduced the Aadhaar system and then the unified payment system, and they achieved 80% financial inclusion within 6 years. So I think that's the power of these types of digital public infrastructure investments, that they can really accelerate this transformation and access to services.
Great. Well, thank you all. I would like to thank first the audience for all of the engagement.